Hello! Welcome to Scott's Odyssey. This week while researching, I came across something interesting that I want to talk about. It may be a little ranty, but we'll find out. The subject, well, Native American massacres. Now, massacres of Native Americans. Still not right. Why is it that you say that statement either way, and it means when the Native Americans performed a massacre against someone else? That grammatically shouldn't make sense. See you in a minute. Welcome back. If you've watched my videos before, thank you for your patronage. And if you're new to Scott's Odyssey, welcome aboard. Like I said previous, it may become a little ranty, but I think it's a really important point to get across. While researching all this historical information, I come across some very interesting ideas and some really hardcore negative connotations that are attached to certain phrases. And one of them is Indian massacre, which always seems to mean a massacre by Indians and never the massacre of said Indians. And I want to dip into it a little bit, but before we even talk about the Native Americans or, the First Peoples or whatever you want to call them, we need to get disclaimers out. Here we go. So as not to have any Native Americans who watch the channel get their family lineage in a twist, which is a joke if you understand how important family lineage is to a Native culture, this video will be talking about how there are few markers and fewer stories in Pennsylvania history that talk about the massacre of the Native Americans, where the natives were the ones massacred when it was not out of retaliation, but just pure hatred of them being different, or greed, or some other sort of non-viable reason like land or a river, things like that. Something that really bothers me because they were equal part of this country's founding and positive history, more than the negative history taught by scholastics as well as wannabe social warriors today. For all of you natives who get offended, go back and talk with your grandfather about the reality of your brothers and your cousins and how we may not all look the same, but we are the same. For those of you whom are already boiling at things I'm saying and want to cry about a genocide that did not exactly happen the way your college professor told you, just remember, you were definitely not the first people. That honor goes to the Siberians who came over the land bridge 23,000 years ago, followed by the East Asians who came over 20,000 years ago, crossbred together to form the Folsom people who went back and then genocided any remaining Siberians or East Asians around 13,500 years ago, just to be eliminated themselves by the giants or the mound builders about 12,750 years ago, right around the Younger Dryas, and we'll touch on that in another video, whom they themselves were wiped out by the Clovis people around 11,700 years ago, but who became so disparate one from another due to the absolute decimation and toll that the giants versus mankind war had taken, that it left us with many different regional tribes of people who stayed to themselves and possibly became the first lineage of whom we call the Native Americans today, who then eventually went on to start genociding each other up until the mid-1800s with little interference from the European colonists, at least initially. And don't start talking about the Great Dying as if it was anything more than the fact that the natives got caught up in the same smallpox pandemic that was killing 55 million people in the rest of the world during that time period. And yes, Native Americans were trading with Europe and Africa for nearly 300 years previous to the beginning of the Great Dying. So Don't argue common cold and other pathogens as if that was some sort of a problem or a reality in history. For all of you whom are not natives, you need to get a grip on reality and learn so much more about history and realize how you are doing a grave disservice to all the people within the world, let alone North America or the United States. Yes, we're still in the disclaimer mode. Just behold up there a little more. Today we have the United States as a united country with states, commonwealths, and reservations. We even have some protectorates out there that we don't do a good job protecting, but that's a whole other story. We are all cousins in this country, and we all see the same things every day and experience the same things every day. We are the future and need to get over all this bison dung left over from our pasts. And that goes for our African descendant people as well. It's good to remember where we came from and our family lineage, but I am not my great-great-grandfather from Ireland, nor my great-great-grandfather from Germany, nor my great-great-grandfather from Poland. I'm Scott, an American who remembers where my family came from, but will fight and defend any of my brothers and cousins within this country long before those of where my ancestors come from. Because this is our land, where we were born, where we marry, where we extend our family, and where most of us will return to whatever spirit you believe in when our time comes to leave. Okay, end of disclaimer. Now on to what I want to talk about in this show. I was doing some research on the Plum Tree Massacre out of Williamsport, PA, and came across the repeated story of how there were Indians hiding in a plum thicket and surprised some local frontiersmen. In the process, they scalped and murdered 12 settlers, where 6 of them were children and 2 of them were women. And I thought to myself, this seems to be an extremely common story where the Indians come and kill a bunch of people with excessive brutality that shows they were not fast-acting nor strategic in any of their mannerisms and were sending some sort of a message. Yeah, just think about it. How long does it take to sneak into a grove, hide there, wait, kill people, scalp them, and then retreat from an area where there are other people with guns less than a quarter of a day away? Not only that, nothing was left behind except for the victims. So what did the Indians do? Some sort of cleanup after the killings and made the area look real pretty and kind of hid the bodies? Didn't they take anything like horses, cattle, grain, clothing, weapons, any food for the home trip? Where's all the information you would expect to hear like that? I mean, I understand they scalped them, but that would only mean that they were taking scalps back to the British or the French for money or proof of taking someone out. But even with all that information, nobody in the area of the massacre left the area, and it only grew in size and population over time. So what was the point of the massacre? Then I thought about it for a bit more and got a little bit cranky. Here's where it kind of gets ranty. I don't remember any time when I read about colonists went out to an Indian tribe and massacred them or took their scalps or took their food or kidnapped their women and children or anything like that. With maybe the exception of the misnamed event of the Paxton Boys massacre, where the Paxton Boys massacred the Conestoga Indians. It wasn't the Paxton Boys that were massacred. You see how that just sounds weird and how that negative connotation comes out? That goes back to the beginning of this video where I actually have to identify that when you say massacre and are talking history, for some reason it is always the Indians doing the massacre. Even with saying the Paxton Boys massacre, it sounds like the Paxton Boys were the ones massacred. Yet if we said the Conestoga Indian massacre, you now hear that the Conestoga Indians did the massacre. And that's just really sad and really weird and needs to somehow be corrected as far as connotations go for the word massacre when coupled with Indians. So all of this was not sitting right with me, and I did a search in my archives for other stories with keywords of Indian and massacre. Every single one 58 in total, came back with Indians doing the massacre. So I searched with just the word massacre, and well, everyone came back with Indians doing the massacre. This really bothered me because our history is extremely rich, and we all know that emigrated and immigrated colonists from Europe, according to modern academia, massacred the Indians from a population of about 15 million into a population of under 238,000. Now, we're going off on a tangential here because the population of Native Americans was about 15 million back in 1492, which is oddly arbitrary because I don't know how the academics calculated that the number of living natives in the United States of America or North America or the continent of America when Chris Columbus had just hit the shores of San Salvador Island down in the Bahamas. But that is what modern day academia is teaching everyone, that there were 15 million natives in North America, even though Chris Columbus in 1492 landed in the Bahamas. That would also mean that between 1492, with a population of 15 million, Native Americans killed each other all the way down to a population of only 6 million by 1636, without any interference from anyone else anywhere in the world. That was the first signs of smallpox coming into Florida via Cuba from the African slaves being ferried by the Spanish after the Spanish had purchased the African slaves from the Moors, who were North Africans themselves. Yes, smallpox started in North Africa with the Moors, or the Egyptians, and spread to the world and reached the New World from African slaves sold by Africans to the Spanish in the Bahamas in 1636. So back to the academia story of native massacres. Yeah, there's that. A fact that before Europeans massacred them, which according to modern academia was done before Europeans were even in North America, somehow colonists that didn't exist magically ended the lives of 9 million Native Americans. Then when the global pandemic of smallpox hit, somehow colonists that still were not in North America took out another 4.5 million Native Americans. Okay, end of the tangential, back to the history and research. So the year is 1620. The 13 colonies are officially founded. The population of those colonies is somewhere around 10 to 15,000 total people. Smallpox hits and brings the natives down to about 238,000 over the next 100 years, while the colonies go up to about 2 million people. Just as another side note, from the 1720s until now, the lowest the Native American population in America that was ever recorded was in the year 1900, with 237,196 people, just 900 less than when smallpox was the king of the continent. Is this information real? Yes. Smallpox really did a number on the East Coast between 1636 and 1720, most likely wiping out at least 90% of the indigenous people. And that's a very real and scary statistic. Also, remember that this is most likely what wiped out the Aztec Empire, which was in existence until the 1530s, which is in a more direct correlation to the African slaves in Cuba than Florida was. So if you think about it and try to figure out what happened to tribes like the Hopi, who just disappeared, well, it probably was smallpox coming up through Mexico due to the Aztec, and they got mostly wiped out due to the disease by the 1630s. And that which did not kill them through disease was finished off by the Pueblo Indian tribes who just came in and eradicated them, then claimed their land and villages as their own. So much for the protection from the Sky Brothers. If we have any descendants of the original Hopi that may be out in the Black Mesa, reach out to me. Give me any corrections that I need have. Tell me any of your stories. be happy to post them and let everyone know it from what you were taught. As I often say, our history is only known by those who tell the history of who we once were. And more often than not, history dies with people looking for money or who think that they own that shared history. So we never hear it. Okay, back to the non-tangential rants and talking about Pennsylvania and the word massacre as it relates to Native Americans. I'm trying to find more stories of Native Americans who were massacred in Pennsylvania by whomever. Native American stories of life in Pennsylvania. Why are there no monuments to all these alleged massacred natives that our government and schools want us to believe happened? I'm not saying it didn't happen, and I'm not denying it. I know that my entire valley that I reside in seems to have been a native burial ground at one point, but nobody knows who they were, and nobody knows why they were here. And then they just automatically tag it, oh, it was the Lenape, even though the Lenape weren't in this region. We use Native American words for so many locations throughout our entire state. Even William Penn was all about the Native Americans, and Washington, with the exception of the bad deal that went down with that crazy I can't even remember how to say his name, Tanacharison. But the chief was still stuck in a native versus native war and took advantage of a teenager who was just going out to build a fort against other Europeans, as I spoke about in the Washington video. I'll post a link for that down below. 2 generations ago, our families played games like Cowboys and Indians from a time where that was a thing that actually happened just 2 generations before them. So even when they were playing it, it wasn't a thing anymore. But the latest 3 out of our 4 or 5 generations that are alive today do not think like that and are always fascinated by Native Americans, their culture, their heritage, yet nobody knows their history beyond the falsified one provided by modern-day academia. Why are there no natives teaching history from their retained stories, especially to the white man who allegedly took their lands? Why do we not learn about native ways or culture in schools that goes beyond the perception that natives never got beyond the Stone Age and were wiped out by the colonists? The natives obviously did and are doing quite fine on many of the reservations, especially ones with casinos. Not to mention the ones that don't live on the reservations. Not saying all reservations are good. There's a lot of really bad stuff going on down on many of them as well, but that just goes to show you who we once were is still who we are today. I know this was not a normal video that you would expect to see from the ODDySEEy, but it is a video that has gotten created because of a lot of concerns I have about how history is getting lost and rewritten and changed to mean things that it never was. It just blows my mind that I cannot tell more stories about Pennsylvania natives and some of their honorable ways. Like when I was in Boy Scouts, we praised them, we praised their ways. We learned as much as we could, and we did things that they allegedly did, and it was a great life. Or good stories like when the old fur trader, Hart, was kindly advised that the actions of other native tribes was putting him at risk, and he needed to leave the area. And he did this by leaving behind a hatchet with symbols both honoring him as a good man and a good friend, and also warning him that they're coming. Anyway, leave me comments below, or reach out to me directly to give me stories of who we once were. I'm looking to retell Native American stories from the perspective of the Native American. I'll even interview you. I don't mind. It would be fascinating. It would appear that this is one of the few situations I have encountered where the history is lost because nobody's talking about it and would prefer to make things up and make things appear in a manner that they did not happen, just to push their own narrative, especially from modern day American white culture and even the African American culture, pushing lies about natives. If you're looking to spread any keyboard warrior drama, be warned, it will be corrected harshly. because I actually enjoy correcting those types of things. And if I'm wrong, I'll post an apology and pin your comment of my correction. So be civil in the comments, and that goes for all sides participating in any of this discussion. Anyway, I hope you liked the tirade / rant / concern / what happened to humanity and remembering our real past / why can't we all just get along aside from some people just being stupid. Remember to give the video a like, click subscribe on the channel, check out the merch store, help support the channel and me as a creator. And as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.